Hello to everyone. Welcome to to the final day of the Ranga Shankara Theatre Festival online. I can see several people who are still joining us today, and also several of our friends in the audience. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you all know, that this talk is part of the Ranga Shankara Theatre Festival, which happens every October to mark the birth month of Ranga Shankara. This year, the theme of the festival is staying alive, keeping in mind the pandemic times that we're living in. This festival is a hybrid festival with both physical and online shows happening over a span of 5 days. So the festival began on October 27, and today is the concluding day. The online show has had both time-bound performances, which are live, and also non-live performances, which could have been watched at any time during the festival. So I had the pleasure of curating the online section of this theatre festival, and when Arundhati called me a few weeks ago that this festival was indeed possible, I was quite delighted, quite happy to know that even amidst these difficult times, Ranga Shankara had found the energy, the space, the strength to go ahead and organize this festival. And I immediately thanked Arundhati and Ranga Shankara for this opportunity. And of course, set myself upon the task of trying to curate the online performances. Now, this is it's a very new vocabulary and a very new grammar for all of us. Many of us have been watching the emergence of online and digital theater in several shapes and forms over the last 1.5 years. It's not by any stretch a new medium. Online and digital theater and performances have been taking place for quite some time now, even before the pandemic hit us. But I think through the pandemic and the shutdowns and the ban on physical assembly for most part of last year and early this year, and the precarity of the pandemic living that we have all experienced, the last 1.5 years has foregrounded new and urgent forms of theater and performance. I began to think of this world as a world of empty stages and crowded homes. And in this world of empty stages and crowded homes, we were witnessing a shift in the setting of theater. Our screens, our devices, email, messages, phone call, video conference platforms such as the one that we're meeting on today, social media platforms, and several other virtual and electronic networks became the new sites on which the dramatic, the performative, the narrative arrived, and in which they right now find refuge as well. The question that I've been asking myself through the process of curating this festival is this: that is this arrival a temporary station, a sort of a brief migration of sorts, a waiting room before we return to the physical venue once the pandemic is over? Or can we understand this contemporary moment to be an instance of an expanding field? Is this alternate virtual medium a lesser cousin of traditional theater? Or is the artistic innovation that we have seen throughout this festival and elsewhere as well, pushing at the gates that guard theater as we know it, in an attempt to throw it open to new possibilities, even as the doors of many theater buildings across the world, and certainly in Delhi, from where I'm joining you today, still remain shut? So I curated the Ranga Shankara Theatre Festival online to respond to these and several more questions. There was a diversity of works that engaged various modes of showing. There were live online performances, showings of recorded acts, performative essay, interactive and participatory online work, and in one instance, a performing interface. Shows were made for collective viewing as well as to produce an intimate one-on-one encounter. And each work proposed an intriguing relationship between our bodies, our stories, and our technologies. It is in this sense, I think that this festival is an interdisciplinary festival as well, because it brings into play multiple forms, practices, and histories that are rarely in dialogue with each other. I've also been moderating a series of talks through the festival. The last 2 days, I've had the pleasure of talking to artists who brought their work to the festival in live and non-live formats. And I hope that some of you have been able to listen to those talks as well. But if you haven't, these talks are up on the Ranga Shankara website. For the final day and the final talk in this series, I have the pleasure of inviting whom I think is the playwright of our times, a very, very dear friend, a collaborator, somebody I look up to, playwright Abhishek Majumdar. Abhishek Majumdar is a playwright, theater director, and scenographer. He's the ex-artistic director and founder of 2 theater companies, Indian Ensemble and Bhasha Center for Performing Arts, both based out of Bangalore. He has created work for and been commissioned by several theaters around the world, including Ranga Shankara Bangalore, Prithvi Theatre Bombay, Royal Court Theatre London, National Theatre London, Deutsche Schauspielhaus Hamburg, Deutsche Schauspielhaus Freiburg, Yale Repertory Theatre, and several other, including Jannat Manch in Delhi, several other organizations. He is the recipient of Charles Wallace India Trust Fellowship, Inlax Fellowship, Shankar Nag Rangakarmi Award, Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Award, Hindu Metro Plus Playwrights Award, and Toto Fund the Arts Creative Writing Award. More importantly, his work has been performed and translated in several languages across the world. He's based out of Bangalore. He's the local boy. I hear that many people follow him when he presents his talks around the world. And today he's joining us from Abu Dhabi, where he takes a course in writing at the NYU Tisch School of the Arts, Abu Dhabi. Welcome, Abhishek. Thank you so much for joining us today for this talk.
Thank you, Amitesh, for inviting me. It's always very special to speak with you, and of course to be able to be part of Ranga Shankara Festival, although I'm not there in Bangalore. So thank you for including me.
It would have been nice for you to be there, but the part of the festival is online as well, and I hope that after the talk you get a few hours to watch the online work that's still available till midnight tonight for audiences around the world. I would want to begin by inviting you to present your recent work. As everyone knows, the theme or the sort of the topic that we'd be talking about today is writing for the new medium. But before I come to inaugurating questions around this, may I invite you to present your recent work, some of which you have actually written for the digital and the online medium, and works that we have seen. And it would be great for us to get to know about the process by which you develop them.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Amitesh, for that invitation. I'll share some of the work, but I have to say that, most of the work that I'm going to show you is online. has been in festivals in many places, but it was not necessarily written for an online medium. That was not the idea behind it at all when it was written. In the sense that it was not that conscious a thing. It was just written within the pandemic. And it so happened that one realized at some point of time that, oh, okay, so somehow all this is going online. And I don't know why I had this. Um, Actually, I know, in the sense, when the pandemic started, we were still running two schools in Bangalore, which are free schools, and there was a lot of, immediately the moment the pandemic started and this lockdown happened, the thing in our face was that the families of the children who come to these two schools, they were struggling a lot with basic things like food and security and things like that. So that really became the most important thing in the lives of the people who were running these two schools. And theater was really not something uh, I was even remotely thinking about at that time. Although there were a lot of conversations around what will happen to theater and what is happening with theater and should we go online, I was not part of it in any way, uh, because the question was what will happen to all these people? How will they eat? And that is what my most immediate uh, response was in. And I did not think I will write anything in the pandemic. I genuinely didn't think I'll write anything. Now, when I look back at it, I'm so surprised at the number of things that have been produced during this time. So that's something I want to, preface with, that there is a kind of momentum of the time, which itself has led to the online versions of all this work. Outside of my conscious agreeing, disagreeing, wanting, willing, anything, it's also this moment in history that we are in, and that's what it is. So the first work that I wrote during this time was a piece called Ration, which I'll show you a little picture of. Actually, this is not Ration. This is one second. I don't know why it is showing. So Ration was written after a sort of moment where I was going for all this food relief and to various places, and I came back home one night and wrote this piece called Ration. Uh, and Ration is about, it's a monologue about a man who lives in the slum and who has alcohol with him. He has desi sharab, and the person who lives in the apartment does not have it. So it's a reversal where the person in the apartment goes to him, calls him at night, and goes to him to ask for booze. And now suddenly this relationship of who is giving and who is taking is changed. Uh, and I experienced this a lot while we were doing this kind of work of giving, relief work, where there was a lot of pride, by people who are migrant workers from around the country, from around Karnataka, from outside Karnataka, who've come to Bangalore. They have left their villages so that they do not have to, beg, and often they have loans back home. And suddenly the pandemic pushed them to a point where overnight the lockdown was declared, and within a week their supplies ran out. But there was a lot of thing about not wanting to take relief. So a large part of the work was about convincing people that you are not, nobody's doing you a favor. It is actually your right to receive this food from the government and from others and so on. So Ration was written on its own without any idea of what is going to happen with it, till Rage Theatre did one-on-one online, and they did this series of monologues, which has only been performed online. I think they have done one show in person. And so this is, in the photograph I showed you, was Rajit playing the lead in Ration. It has also been done by a group called Kahe Vidushak in a very good production in Bangalore, in Hindi. So that was the first one that I wrote. And then soon enough, again, I thought that was it, and I would have nothing to do with writing, and I was out. But it was a very intense time because we were out a lot. We were out almost all day, and coming back in the evenings. And this is when I wrote a second piece called Salt. which was originally written for, it was written by me, but it was taken up by this theater in Sweden, which was still performing live, but without an audience. So it would be online, but the actors are not on Zoom or anything. They are on stage. It's very minimal, and the writing needs to be such that the images are kind of there in the writing. You can't really have any scenography and that kind of thing. So then I wrote Salt, which is, I'll show you one version, which is I'll show you. Salt has been done a lot. This is the version which is the Swedish version. One second.
Det var en gång en... Det var...
So Salt is about a house where there are three women, a mother and two daughters, and they just have salt now to eat. But each one of them is saying a separate lie to be able to make the salt seem like rice because it's white. So the mother believes that the children don't care about how much food there is. The only thing they care about is how big is the story. So she's trying to think of a long story so that it feels like the food is lasting for long. Whereas the children actually think that the mother believes so. So they are pretending to listen to a long story, whereas actually they know that they're filling their stomachs with salt. And it is this thing about the lie which a family has to tell each other in order to survive with dignity in a crisis. So as you will see, this version, this Salt has many versions. This version is without an audience but on the stage. I'll show you 2 minutes of it. 1 minute.
En gång var det... Det var... En gång dog en modig flicka genom att röra vid de rika. Hon dog inte av hunger som sin far. Det var en gång en flicka som åt hela magen full och dog lycklig av en sjukdom.
Okay, so that is the version where there's no audience but the performance is live. Now I'll show you a version which MD Pallavi has done, who is also here, which is in Kannada, and she performed in this version all the three roles of all three women, and this is pretty much shot in her house. Okay, and this was also part of last year's Ranga Shankara festival.
ಅವನು ತನಕ ನಾ ಕಥಿ ಎಳ್ದ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಮೈ ಅದಾವ, ಕೈಯ ಅದಾವ, ಕಾಲ ಅದಾವ, ಬಳ್ಳದಾವ, ತೊಳಿ ಬಳಿ ಗೌಂಡಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಏನ್ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾಡು, ಆದ್ರೆ ಬೇಡೋಣ ಬ್ಯಾಡ. ವಿಮಾನದಾಗ ಹತ್ತಿ ಯಾವ್ದೋ ರೋಗ ಬಂದೈತಿ, ಎಲ್ಲರದು ನಮ್ದ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಆಗೈತಿ. ಈ ಊಟದ ಪ್ಯಾಕೆಟ್ ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಸತ್ತ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ಸ್ತೈತಿ. ಕೆರಿಗೆ ಬಿದ್ದು ಸಾಯ್ಬೇಕಂತ ವಿಚಾರ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಖರೆ ಯಾರು ಉಳಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತ ಮುಳುಗಿದ್ದ ಆಯಾಸಕ್ಕೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹಸುವಾದ್ರೆ.
This is the Kannada version, which is in a completely different format. Now I'll show you 2 minutes of the Hindi version, which actually is done on stage again, but it was also done with an audience.
हमरी लड़की लोग को ना कहानी सुनना बहुत पसंद है, लेकिन ऐसा कहानी पसंद नहीं है जो कि भात के साथ साथ खत्म नहीं होता है. भात, हाँ, वो अपार्टमेंट देख रहा है ना उधर, वहां, हाँ, हम वही काम करते हैं. 7 घर में, बर्तन झाड़ू पोछा सब। सुबह 5 बजे जाते हैं और दोपहर 1 बजे वापस आते हैं। आ करके इसी डेगची में चावल डाल करके चूल्हा पे चढ़ा देते हैं। पूरा 25 मिनट लगता है चावल को पकने में। तब तक दोनों स्कूल से आ जाती है, हम लोग साथ में बैठ के खाते हैं। तब हम इन लोगों को एगो कहानी सुनाते हैं। हम गरीब हैं पर खाने को मिल जाता है। हम कमाते हैं ना, वही घर सब में, 7 घर में साफ सफाई सब। ये लोग खाती हैं, हम कहानी को टानते हैं। हमको कहानी को जानते हैं टानना पड़ता है, काहे कि लोग चाहती हैं कि भात का जो आखिरी हिस्सा है वो कहानी के आखिरी किस्सा के साथ में खत्म हो।
Yeah. So there is also, now see, I think this is one of the most fascinating things about this period of going online, which is that as a playwright you expect different productions in all ways, but you don't expect the same play to be done in completely different formats, you know. And different format means in which there is an audience, secondly there is no audience, third time there are actors but no audience, but you know, like this kind of thing. So that becomes quite an interesting puzzle also to solve, like what do you do when you are moving between these kind of situations. So that was solved, which I have actually never directed but I have written. And Then after Salt, there was we did Desdemona Rupakam, which is also a production with Ranga Shankara, which was in person. Now this was very interesting because it is co-written by 7 people, and all of us, Bindu, Malini, Pallavi, me, Veena, Ira, we got together, and essentially the question was, if we are making a play in person right now and we have stepped out of our houses, what is it that we want to say? We are taking this risk, we are going out, our families are taking this risk, so what is it that we want to say? So everything around Desdemona Rupakam is about speaking about, you know, the voices of missing women in the epics, from Ramayana to Nala Damayanti to, of course, Othello and, you know, hence Desdemona. It is in Kannada, Tamil, and English, with Kannada and English subtitles. It's an opera, so it is completely sung. I'll show you 1 minute of Desdemona Rupakam as well. This one has a video. This is going to be online as well, but mainly Desdemona Rupakam is a stage show. So it has been performed live, and also we have now moved it to something called Home Kacheri, which is a version where one second, where we are performing this in homes other than performing it on stage. So this is actually from Ranga Shankara. Yeah, so that's Desdemona Rupakam, which is completely sung in these two languages, mainly Kannada and Tamil. Then I did one show called Najma Nama, which is actually a trilogy, which is about a girl called Najma who is a sex worker in Bangalore and how she gets isolated. So the 3 parts of Najma Nama are Najma's story, then Najma's sister Salma, who's waiting in the village, and she has become a healthcare worker. You know, like there were these girls who were appointed to take the temperature at the railway station. So she has got that job. And the third is Najma's last client, who claims to be also her lover. So it is a story about looking at this whole thing of globalization of Bangalore through the lens of this girl Najma, who has come from the village and who has been sold multiple times in this place. And again, this was taken from many of there was a big trafficking racket that unfurled while we were doing our relief work in this whole time, where there were many girls who did not have Aadhaar cards because the men who trafficked them kept the Aadhaar card with them. So then, when we finally managed to get these girls out with the police, the challenge was that what category do they fall under? Which relief program applies to them? Because they don't have Aadhaar card, they are not in any relief program. But actually, their Aadhaar cards are with the men who sold them. So there are these enormous gaps in our thinking of who is the country, what is the nation, which became part of, I think, both all Ration, Namak, and Najmanama. So that Najmanama opened in Tara Arts last 2-3 months ago in London at their season, for the first season now. It has played there. It will open in India as well in Urdu. And lastly, I want to show you one. This is just, it's a book. This is the one that I'm directing now. I'll be directing from January actually. This is one second. Raju is refusing to leave. One second. Anyway, I'll just tell you about it. So it's a book called Solo Vazio, which is a Portuguese novella, and it is written by a writer who's also a performer. And this is a very different piece because this we are developing online completely. So it is the opposite of Desdemona Rupakam, which was completely developed offline, but also has an online version. Solo Vazio is completely developed, but will also have an online version. Solo Vazio is the story of a woman who lives in a so there is a site close to Sao Paulo where there was a this thing, what do you call it? Mining site. The whole thing collapsed once. So the whole city, it's like a small town. It completely vanished because the thing collapsed. So it's the story of one woman who stays back and about what it is to be in a place where none that was expected of this place has come true, and the whole thing has completely gone for a new reality has come into being, which also spoke to us because of the time we are in. So developing this now, and this is the interaction here. There is a text that is written, but it's also that she plays few characters and the audience interacts with her, and the audience chooses to go to different places, and it's all completely done in her house and in her backyard. But you see sites that you would see if you were in Sao Paulo, which are recreated in her neighborhood. So I'm working on that now with her. That will open sometime next year. We have just we're getting the English translation done. I mean, just for me to read, but it is in Portuguese, and we will also do it in Brazil. And the last thing that happened is that I'm right now in Abu Dhabi directing a film on Water Station, Otoshoga's non-verbal play. This was supposed to happen last year, but it didn't, and as a play. So this year we thought of doing it again, but New York University suggested that how can we make sure that we can do it and it doesn't have a possibility of a pandemic hitting us, because we have students from so many countries coming in. So we moved it to a film. So what is really interesting is, on one hand, it started with, I think this period for me started with Ration, which was one person's story from a slum close to my house in Bangalore. And it has now gone to a place where there is a film which is being shot in a desert with people from various countries, which is non-verbal. And in between this, there have been things that are physical, things that are online but different formats, things that have been made for physical but have gone online, and stuff that was supposed to be online but has actually been made in a physical way. What has been very interesting for me is obviously to always work in different formats and different languages, and this has been a very ripe time for that. Yeah, so I stopped there. I hope that was of some use.
Thank you, Abhishek, for taking us through this, what seems to be quite a body of work that you've produced. And how, I was listening to you not just as a moderator of this talk, but also as an artist who and a practitioner, and also secretly marveling at the energy that you had throughout the year and a half, the last year and a half, to be able to produce so much writing. And the first thing that strikes me as you talk about your writing is that a majority of your writing comes from researched and lived experiences. So you seem to be uh, very willing to throw yourself out there, unlike other writers who might not get their hands dirty, yeah, if I can use that phrase, um, and also to the extent of leaving writing behind and participating in relief efforts and taking on the role of the activist, talking about what you see. I've read several of your social media posts during the time as well, and I remember the rage with which you wrote, and also the act of witnessing what many of us who were under lockdown and would refuse to leave our homes could not witness. So I remember you during that time as our the witness of our collective conscience. And when you say that a lot of these writings and plays have come out of your direct experience of having seen firsthand what was happening, um, I am tempted to also understand your writing as a reportage, as a almost like a sort of a semi kind of journalistic effort to not just write what reporters and journalists would see in an objective way, but to actually bring your subjective position, and to add and develop and build upon the people you meet and the situations you find yourself in. And this is where my first question to you comes from, which is that um, personally, I find it extremely difficult to immediately transform my lived experience into an artistic work. I need time, and I know of several other artists who and writers who need time to digest and churn and produce writing later. Whereas with you, it's happening almost as an immediate response. So could you take us through this transformation that happens for you, from the lived experience, from what you witness to the writing desk, and it immediately also reaches the stage? How do you see this sort of a fast track of several transformations, layers and layers that are packed into this?
Hmm. Well, actually, what happens is that generally this does not happen with me. Like when I'm researching something, say a play on Kashmir or on Tibet or whatever else or like Mukti Dham, which I wrote, which was about historical context. It takes a really long time. There is often 1.5, 2 years of research, sometimes more. Like the Tibet play I wrote was over 5 years. Um, and I really enjoy that process of research. For me, that is part of the reason why I am in the theater, is that I want to experience other subjects, and I think the theater gives me that opportunity. So I didn't think that this work would get created. Desdemona Rupakam is a different ball game, because it is very much a theater piece where we have worked on it collaboratively. I might have come with the seed of the idea, and then we worked on it. So that includes energies of lots of people. And that is also something great about the theater, I think, that when one is feeling that, okay, I have nothing to say alone, but yet I want to make theater. Like, I mean, that's something I really want to do. So then you get people together who together have something to say, and then you participate in that. in whatever capacity you can. So to me, that is a very important thing. Like once in a while in my life, when I've had a kind of, you know, have a block, I sometimes call my students and I say, "Are you doing something?" And somebody say, "I'm doing a play." And I say, "You know, do you have a lighting designer?" And the person will say, "No, will you design?" I say, "Yeah, yeah, I'll come and design it." You know, I can do anything in the theater. Like, you know, I'm happy to do anything. So if I get a block and somebody needs a scenographer, I'll join. You know, whatever somebody wants backstage help, I can come because I like it. You know, just that thing. I love being in the theater. So that is one aspect of it. So it doesn't always have to be something that I am leading. But with the pandemic, something very strange happened. You know, I did not think I will write, but I can tell you that those nights, those days of moving within maybe 15 minutes of a radius of my house and realizing that I don't live actually in an area full of apartments, but I live in an area full of small slums, which is dotted with apartments. But for 10 years, I lived there. I live on Sarjapur Road in Bangalore. The picture that I had was the converse. And the reason is that from my house to my daughter's school, to the bank, to the theater, to whatever, I don't have to cross anything. I just have to take one road. And my biggest problem was traffic. But suddenly, now we were going to all these places which are hidden inside apartments, and I couldn't sleep. You know, I just could not sleep after that. Because, like, you know, one of the reasons I stayed in Bangalore was rain. I love the rain in Bangalore. You know, I love the weather in Bangalore. It's easily my most favorite city in the world for this reason. Uh, but when I went and saw these asbestos tin houses, you know, getting filled with water, and in a house where there are 7 people who are renting a small asbestos room house because 3 of them work night shift and 4 of them work day shift. The understanding is that 7 of them will never be at home in the same time. And suddenly in the pandemic, 7 of them are there. They can't go anywhere. And it's raining. And there are children who are running behind just packets of salt. It, I mean, this is such a bourgeois thing to say, but it really gave me the shivers. And I realized that, you know, several years ago I had studied rural development. Yes, Mama. 1 second. Rise here from school. 1 second. Yes. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Okay, bye. Yeah. So, you know, I had kind of moved away from this world, I think. So everything was research for me, you know, and research was far away. Like I would go to Kashmir to research, to Tibet to research, and this is 15 minutes from my house. So it was this kind of, I in a way feel very, you know, strangely, I don't know what is the word. You know, sometimes in life you realize that thank God you can write, or you think you can write, because otherwise what would happen to this experience? Like one would explode out of it. But this was the natural thing, and then it felt good to feel that okay, it wasn't that, you know, when I was in college I could write about things that expected me, and now I was only writing for theaters. So lot of this work was really not written for anybody. In fact, 80% of the work that I write is not written for anybody. A lot of them are short stories which are only for my friends and family. I never publish them, I never give it to anyone. And it was good to find that uh, in this work. So I don't know how this happened at such a as an immediate response. Generally, that doesn't happen to me as well. But I think this experience was much more intense than what happens usually.
And you also mentioned that that you love being in the theater, and we were all shut out of what has defined our careers and defined us as artists for perhaps the first time in the longest time. Um,
Yeah.
and 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 so many of us had to think about performance in theater in a very different way, and some thought that the screen was a reduction of the environment that we are all so used to immersing ourselves into when we go to a venue, while others thought that there was a complete breakdown of community, where there was no longer possible to come together, the brief temporary community that all of us are a part of when we come to visit and watch theater, that had completely broken down, and that the online experience would never be able to reproduce that in any way. You also mentioned that you have moved very easily beyond across these borders, um, and in that sense, I also sense a sort of not too much of a concern with the relationship between medium and writing. Um, is that would you say that you're not too concerned with this relationship, that your writing actually is uh, can very easily, you allow it to adapt itself to different mediums and forms and shapes, and that's how you do you consciously write it? Or that as a writer you do write thinking about the physical theater venue, and imagining it, but then when others take it to other mediums, you're happy to see it there?
Yeah. Um, no, actually, I am very, very concerned about the medium. Uh, Very concerned about the medium when I'm writing. Uh, because think of the craft of it a lot, that how will it work, and that's something very interesting about writing, not only in theater, in every form, like in novel, short story also, but in the theater it becomes even more important, that how does it work, like there is an engineering, there is a geometry to writing, which is very important to me, and I enjoy that. I always feel that a play is like a mathematical problem with multiple solutions, and you have to find the most elegant solution. It's not like there is one solution, there are many solutions to it. And that's something I used to love about mathematics as well when I was a little active mathematics student. Uh, so when it goes to the digital medium, like now the thing that I'm doing in Portuguese, you and I have had lots of conversation about your piece, and I'm curating your piece for my students, and I'm also interested to see what all can be done if it is only online, and what are you guys doing? What can I learn from it? What can I bring to it? This is something continuous. It's not to any end. It is just the way of being in the theater. I think you learn from each other, and you try to add your own thing, and you try to make something new. But I also think that the online medium was declared as the Lear's first daughter very quickly, and I think that was a mistake actually. It was really like the first scene of Lear, where the daughter which said "I love you" the most, Lear decided to give everything to that daughter. I don't think the online media, because most people, other than 10, 15 cities in the world, don't have access to online work, right? So, in a way, it is very worrying for me that a lot of theater makers who were not in the online medium earlier, you know, I'm not talking about people who were already invested in technology, like you were already in the space of technology, and for you, it was an extension. But for a lot of people, it was also obviously desperation. Now, what do? We have to go online. But in a lot of places where even I am working, like I am doing some work in Bengal also, there is no question of online. It is about how do you perform this play by going to different locations. Or in Jaipur, they had done Idgah Ke Jinnat on a terrace. So it is also these places where people don't have that kind of internet access, but there are small plays that can be staged. So what are these small plays? What will these small plays be? Which will not have no scenography, which will have no light change. How should that be written? But which can match the spectacle that is going on in their life right now, which is the pandemic. The pandemic is also one of the biggest spectacles that we have seen. Deserted roads, no light, there's nothing. So how do you match that in with so little? And actually, in classical drama, we see this, right? If you see our Indian classical, Japanese, no, or Italian classical, or even Shakespeare, up till Shakespeare, so much of the words are the images, because there won't be a scenery. They are the time change. They are, so you have to write the grammar of it slightly differently. Because I think for me the technology is what? Am I writing for a theater which has a dimmer board or not? Even that is technology, right? So if I write a scene, I know this, whether Now, the joy of the theater is that a director can completely take it and make it something else. And which is what has happened. If you gave ration to me, I would not be able to do it the way these guys have done. Or namak in 4 different languages. There is Gujarati, Kannada, Hindi, Swedish. I think these 4. And all 4 are in different formats. I would have never been able to imagine it. I would have imagined one format, which was interesting to me, but not these 4 formats. So I am very, very interested in the medium, but I also find myself very lucky that I am in the theater where you can pass on the baton and see what other people do with it. And you get credit for no reason actually because you didn't think about it at all. So yeah, I think that happens.
I'm going to ask one last question before throwing it open to our audiences. Everyone who's attending today, it's a small group, so instead of the usual request of asking attendees to type your questions in the Q&A and in the chat box, it would be nice if you would like to ask the question by turning on your microphone, and if you're comfortable, also turning on your video to chat with us and with Abhishek. And while you think about the question that you might want to ask, I just want to ask one last question, Abhishek, which is because you mentioned the craft of writing, and your plays display that craft really well. And each play has a very thought out craft, a very thought out structure. You think about time, you think about space, you think about how the rhythm of the sentences. And while listening to you, I was also trying to recall how the entire history of playwriting is also the history of theatrical space, in the sense that so many modern playwrights have written stage instructions as part of their plays. The thousands of people who can be accommodated in an amphitheater, the Greek amphitheater, that space is also written into the Greek tragedies, the poems, and the comedies. It's also true of Shakespearean writing, that when we read the word, we just don't read the story. We also read the space within which that is happening. And so when you talk about the craft, I wonder, when you sit down to write, do you have a space in mind which is other than the immediate local context of the story or where the story is taking place?
What do you mean? I didn't understand your question.
What I'm asking is that every play and every story has its own space in which it's happening. It could be a house, it could be a city, etc. But there is another kind of space that play is written into, and that is perhaps the theater, the black box, the what kind of performing spaces are prevalent during that time. And because we live in the post-digital age, I have started to come across writing that is only and only exclusively written for the online, for the screens, for these talking heads kind of squares and rectangles. And I was wondering if that is something, do you consider, do you imagine the space, the medium or the form in which your writing will be played or could be played? Or absolutely not? Do you keep it absolutely free for people, for directors and other theater groups to interpret and imagine it?
Yeah. I think to answer your second question first, I keep it open for other people to interpret it the way they want to. For the simple reason that I like to direct myself a lot. I direct other people's writing. I direct devised work. And I think there is a kind of theatricality that a director and a team brings to a production, which has its own logic. You know. So over the years, what I've done is I've told people you can also edit my plays, but don't add something without my permission, because I've seen that happen. And when that happens, you're in shock, right? You're doing a production of something of Rizwan, and suddenly there is a song by Simon Garfunkel inside it, Why? Because it has the words homeward bound. So I have told people that, भाई ऐसा मत करो, जोड़ो मत कुछ, आपको निकालना है आप निकाल लो. If you want to add, you ask me. That's my only thing, right? Otherwise, I think, there are productions I've seen of my plays which I couldn't even imagine. It would be impossible for me to write because there is a life behind the production. Like I think every artist's life leads to a particular production, and we don't live the same life, so we can't come up with the same production. So that's one thing. As far as what I think about while writing, sometimes I have the theater in mind, like I'm writing for this theater, which is a game one plays with oneself, because of course you're not writing for that theater. What is this theater? It will go everywhere, right? But it is, you're thinking of that. It helps to fix something, and then think of other things. Sometimes I'm thinking of, nowadays, increasingly, I'm thinking of the theatrical space rather than the theater space, right? So for me, theatrical space is what I'll tell you, when public things happen in private and private things happen in public. So a couple has to have their most intimate conversation in the middle of a battlefield, or two people are in bed and they are having to pretend, because they know that they are being seen by other people. Now, to me, this is very interesting. I think in our lives we live a lot of this, and this itself is very theatrical. So there is the kind of, again, like I think some years ago I realized that now I'm not thinking in, I'm not thinking in music or acting or lighting. I'm thinking in theater, and it took some years for that to happen, that I started thinking in theater. It wasn't because earlier I used to think in music, and then I used to think, okay, how will now this become theater? So this was a lot of fun when this happened. I feel once you spend some years in anything, you can spend that many years in whatever, you can start thinking in that field. So I'm often thinking of that theatrical space rather than, like right now I'm thinking of a play which is actually a new play for the Royal Court, but they have liked the draft that I have written, but I have pulled it out because I want to introduce Ram Leela into it. And when I was a child, we used to see a lot of Garhwali Ram Leela in JNU, where I grew up. So I want to bring in that element of the Garhwali Ram Leela into the play. Now, I'm just really interested in how that works. That Hanuman who's a driver, but who steps down and becomes God and then flies. To me, that is interesting. How that will happen, I don't know. I'll work it out. So a lot of this craft is also really, like it is great work. Like I enjoy doing it, or redrafting it. And I have an office right now. I'm not sitting in office. I'm at home, but my office has all the walls have things written on it because I'm continuously drawing and figuring out what happens after this. Not only for things that I'm writing, but also for things that I'm directing. So I enjoy that about the theater, about thinking in different spaces. So if somebody tells me that, look, there is a space we know, will you write for this space? I'll think slightly differently. And somebody tells me, okay, I'm writing something and I don't know what space, then I'll think differently. For the longest time, I used to only write for Ranga Shankara. When I started out, I was so enamored. I'm still very enamored with Ranga Shankara, but in my head, the theater was Ranga Shankara. And then we started traveling, and it became a handicap because I realized after a while that I'm only seeing that stage in my head. So I had to really teach myself how to not think of only Ranga Shankara as a stage. But I think inadvertently that is where I keep going to in my head.
That is really interesting, Abhishek, that you mentioned the space in your head when you're writing. Because I can understand how challenging this would be for a playwright such as you, because novelists on the one hand have the page and the book, and that's their primary medium. Film writers have the film. Short story writers have again the page and the different sort of stories that make for an anthology. But a playwright, what's the space for a playwright? Uh, According to English departments, plays are not meant to be read but are to be performed. So they're not part of canonical literature that's to be read like the word. And yet, increasingly, I find that more and more people are reading plays, are taking to reading them, and not performing them so much. And so it's very interesting to listen to how the mind of a playwright works through you. And also, thank you for saying about sharing ideas about the chaotic blend of private and public spaces, because that's another consequence of the pandemic times, that all of us are broadcasting persistently from our private places, and to throw open my private space, my home, to hundreds and thousands of people, while the public spaces remain forbidden, remain empty, is again this, it has led to a shift in how we think about what is the public and what is the private, and therefore the sort of the public entering the private and the private entering the public is, I think, again, it's a compelling thing to think about in the post-pandemic world. At this point, I just want to ask people who are attending our talk today, if there are any questions that you would like to ask Abhishek. You can type them, or you can just simply unmute yourself and ask Abhishek the question. This is also a good moment for us to know if people are indeed listening. Or like many Zoom conversations that take place, they just put the Zoom on and go and cook. Are there any comments or questions that you have?
Hi, Amitesh and Abhishek. This is Ashish. It's great to see both of you together, and after a long time. Thank you for this program. First of all, I really do not know whether I have the competence to ask Abhishek any questions about his theater world, because I haven't, very sadly, and it's a matter of shame for me, been able to watch any of his productions. And he is a brother first to me, and then theater maker of world or global repute. And I had the opportunity and the fortune to include one of his great play texts, in my Bloomsbury volume on Islam in Performance. It's so titled, Islam in Performance. So my first acquaintance with him, or my introduction to this great playwright, is through a text. And as a writer of that text and several other texts he had shared with me via email, and I was so impressed to read all of them. So my knowledge and appreciation about Abhishek's texts is, in the text you find everything. You call it space, you call it scenography, you call it conflict. Obviously, it will be there because a play text develops in terms of dialogue. And it could be conflictual dialogue, it could be an interpersonal, very intimate conversation. And then even the multiplicity of form that I'm so attracted, for which I'm so attracted to his plays. He has his unique way of establishing the content or the thematic on one hand, and the form and the structure of the style on the other. And everything, I think, he has very successfully, splendidly compressed into the text. But I cannot, but just, a few of the productions, clips from which he had shown by sharing his screen with all of us. I think I just have one, out of curiosity, a question for Abhishek. Since we really do not know yet, what would be the venue for us all to meet as the playwright, or the director, the scenographer, or the light designer, or the audience? Are you thinking of any change in your medium or engaged in experiment within a medium? I ask this question more particularly because you have shared that story with us that the NY told you, what would be the form? Because are you sure that the pandemic would be over by such and such time, etc.? So you have probably, if I got you right, converted into a film. And Amitesh is also doing great work by experimenting with the cyberspace, which is very different from just videographing a play in the physical space and then showing it online. So I think I respect Abhishek so much as a meticulous researcher and a very compassionate individual. And I do not know whether he would be happy to accept this level. Many of the theatre makers do not. A social activist, a very socially, politically sensitive mind, and a fine writer of prose. Which has all the dramatical and the theatre or theatrical, as he distinguished the theatre from the theatrical qualities about it. Yes, Abhishek. Sorry, maybe I went a little bit, a little longer than I should have.
No, Ashishda, thank you for.
Yeah, Bodhi is also here listening to you.
Oh, hello, Bodhi.
Thank you.
Thank you for that all those generous things you said, Ashishda. Actually, I think like all the the pieces that I discussed, they're all in different forms. Something is on stage, something is online. Within online, there are 3 or 4 forms. Now, the film is a different form, and to me, it is each work has its own form as long as it is with me. And when it goes out of my hand to somebody else's hands, they have their own form. And I think people also who I give my work to and who are making this work, they are of different age groups, and they are also at different places in their journey. Like there are plays which have been directed. The same play has been directed by some very young director who was in Delhi University, and then also directed by Jamil Ahmed in Bangladesh, for example, who had this for the same play. He had a major, huge production.
Right.
But the Delhi University production was also fantastic. This director Akshay Raheja, the way he did the play, where he was doing a production of Rizwan, where people walked in with blindfold, and initially they just felt various surfaces and they heard sounds, and then they got into the story, and the story was revealed in a room as they moved around. That is absolutely not the way the play was written. So I think one is actually the most sincere answer to that is that you decide a form and you get into it, and then you see how it works, how to make it work. I think inside that there are a lot of possibilities. What is theatrical is definitely an interesting question in all forms. What is the content? What are we saying? That is, and what is the politics of what we are saying? I think that is also a very important part of it. And the great thing about the theater is that it is a combination of all these things. I think when we stage a play, we promise our audience that we will give you a gallery visit, a concert, a dance performance, a discourse, and we will also entertain you enormously while all this is happening. It's a long promise. I don't think we ever fulfill it completely. But with time, we try not to be lazy in our subsequent works, and continue to strive to change that. And the last thing I want to say about that is that also another feature of our time is that I don't think there are any masters anymore. I might be wrong. I don't know. Amitesh might be able to say this in a more detailed way. But in our last generation, also there were masters.
Yeah,
From Suzuki to Ratan Thyam to Veena Pani, who had a form, and in that form they developed great work. And the works were not the same; there were variations, but there was a much broader commonality, and there was a masterful, creation of a building, and then all this was happening. For whatever reason, now I feel that that's not the case. We are continuously moving forms, all of us, and I might be speaking of very few people. There might be people who are still doing that, But I do feel that the age of masters, at least for us, at least the people I know, is no longer visible, and hence the change in form and variation is absolutely alive, and it has to be. There is no choice of moving out of that.
Right, through collaboration.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Abhishek.
Abhishek, you've opened another can of worms by talking about the age of masters that's gone, and I really do wish we had the time to explore that statement a little bit more. It's a very interesting one that you make, but we're nearly out of time, and I have the responsibility to sticking to time. I'm a timekeeper as well for this talk, so. We might need to wind up soon, but before we do, I just want to ask you two quick questions to get a glimpse into what what's preoccupying you right now. The first question is, what are you reading right now?
Actually, there are two answers to this. One is that I'm reading much less than what I usually do, because right now I'm making this film, Water Station, and I'm very close to shooting. So a lot of my time is in that. So I'm reading much lesser than what I usually do. I'm reading two small things right now. One is a book on Gödel, the mathematician. It's a book called Incompleteness, which is on his incompleteness theorems and his life and his work. That is something that's fascinating. And the other is from we have this thing called Puja Shankha, which is during Durga Puja you get these all the big magazines of Bengal. They have these collection of novels and stories. So this year's Puja Shankha I didn't get because I'm here. And last year's I didn't get because it was a pandemic, it was not available. So I'm still carrying the one from the year before that. So I'm reading a very good story of Sunil Gangopadhyay from 2 years ago, that Puja Shankar. So these are the two things I'm reading.
And any new thing that you're teaching yourself? Any new skill? Any new?
Oh yes, I'm teaching myself how to make a film. that is a completely new thing for me. It's fascinating that every day I discover that but this is what we do in the theater, and this is done this way in the film. And next morning I realize, oh my god, but this is something which is totally different. And then by evening again it seems like, all right, but this is the equivalent of that. I think I have to stop being, how, like there are these Bengali tourists who wherever they go to whichever country, whichever place, they go there and say, oh, this is like Jadavpur, oh, but this is like Howrah. Like I did this when I saw Eiffel Tower. I called home and I told my wife that, what is this big deal? This is just Howrah Bridge standing up. What is the big deal about Eiffel? That was my actually first reaction to Eiffel Tower was, what the fuss? What is the fuss about this thing? It's literally Howrah Bridge vertically. So I am doing the same thing with filmmaking at the moment. I'm continuously comparing it to theater and saying, ye kya? Acha, oh, acha, this is similar, this is. But I think, getting to that point where I'm recognizing that it is a different city. It is not the same city. There might be things that I have learned in my city which will be useful, but I have to stop being that Bengali tourist that I am being right now.
So I'm going to wish you all the luck with this struggle against being a Bengali tourist.
Thank you.
May you become a global tourist, a global traveler, which you already are, venturing into forms and fields that are unknown to us. And I look forward to all the upcoming work that you're producing right now. Thank you, Abhishek, so much for giving us your time and sharing your work and sharing your thoughts with us today. It was indeed a pleasure to be in conversation with you.
I'd like to clap for all of you.
Thank you, Achita.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care, all of you. Bye, Amitesh.
Thank you. Bye, Abhishek. Bye, everyone.